Thank you very much for having us. As you can see, the topic of our talk today is Go Woke or Go Broke. We have deliberately picked a picture of some laundry because let's face it, as a marketing community, we are riddled with fear. We're actually terrified of backlash. There's rainbow washing, there's pink washing, there's green washing. There's so much washing that we're terrified of. Quick show of hands in the room. How many of you, either in your current role or in a previous role, have made a safer choice or a safer creative decision because you were a bit worried about backlash? Yeah, quite a few hands going up in the room. And, marketers, we are people too, and I just want to reassure you that the British public feels exactly the same as you. In the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen a 107% increase in people agreeing that they are worried about backlash because if they spoke out about sort of gender rights, for example. But fear, as a wise woman once told me, is the opposite of love. And if we want to create a loving, more inclusive society and a more inclusive marketing industry, then we need to overcome this, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kick off with the facts and give you a little bit of a landscape. Here's the state of the nation. And then Eleanor and I are going to launch into a debate where I am going to play the role, in a very hammy way, of a long-tenured CFO who is very concerned about the bottom line and a little bit conservative.
I, assuming that I can actually talk over my cough, I'm going to play the new, young CMO. I really want to do well by my customers. More importantly, of course, I'm only going to be in the job a short time, so I also want to make lots of money so I can get my next job. And so we're going to have this debate. And then after that, we're going to arm you with the so what. Give you some inspiration, give you some actions, so that as Nish called you to action, you'll be able to go away and do something about it from tomorrow. So, where are we in this woke world? Well, we're definitely much, much, much more familiar with the term going woke. But as it becomes more familiar, it's also starting to become somewhat of an insult rather than a compliment. And that's particularly true of our 16 to 24-year-olds who were very on board with being woke at the beginning and now starting to feel that maybe people are having a go at them for it. Again, as Nish commented on, we are a pretty divided nation. There are lots of tensions and people really believe that there are problems between people born here and people who are immigrants, between different classes, and gently sloping away between different political points of view. But, of course, this is an election year. I suspect that as people are trying to find differentiating points between their points of view, that's going to go back up. There is, however, one place where really there are increasing tensions, and that's on gender. Possibly unsurprising given some of the conversations that are going on these days. And of course, we'll hear about more of that later today. But there is some hope. When we ask people about what success is in their offline world, then the number one thing that they talk about is treating people well. So fundamentally, we all want to be on the right side of being nice to people. But as soon as you get online, you start to look at what makes success there and what the conversations are about making it, it's all about hate. If you don't have people who are attacking you, then you have not made it. And it's these kind of things that start to provoke that culture war. And there are a set of people who are going to be talking a lot this year who are really at the heart of this. And actually, increasingly, the public thinks that it's those politicians who are driving that agenda. So it's the public discourse that is actually setting the context for this kind of negative statement. But you have a responsibility and indeed permission to do something about this. Because 57% of people think that brands should talk about diversity and inclusion. And when we look at those people, they really believe that you ought to be doing it as well. So you have permission to make a difference.
So quick show of hands in the room, because we are really interested in, we were really excited to come to this room and see how this splits out. In our industry, what do you think is the blocker, the biggest blocker for, against the case of sort of making more inclusive marketing? Do you think it's a lack of evidence, or do you think it's a lack of will or corporate enthusiasm? So hands up if you think it's evidence. Hands up if you think it's will or enthusiasm. Wow, okay, that is very interesting. So what we're going to do now is to run a little debate where, as I said, I'm going to play the long-tenured conservative CFO. We're going to provide you with evidence as well as hopefully some fodder to drive that enthusiasm in your own organization so you can influence sideways, upwards, downwards, whichever way you need to go. All right, so shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, Eleanor, the latest Ipsos global trends data shows me that 29% of the UK think that the main role for a woman is to be a wife, good wife and a mother. Now, data in isolation is not that interesting. Right, what I'm more interested in, because I look at the long-term trends on which I can build my business, the thing that worries me is that the trend's actually on the increase in the UK, and not just the UK, but also places like Sweden, which is very important to our European operations, and is basically held up as the symbol of everything that's progressive in society, and there are big increases in these trends. So, and you keep telling me that we need to get Gen Z on board, but hey, guess what the data says? It says that 16 to 24s are more likely to agree with this than 45 pluses. So A, are we out of touch with people? And B, should we really kind of pause and reflect?
Well, Sam, I think when we talk to our friends at Ipsos, you'll see in their database that actually quite a lot of women portrayals are still very much in those sort of traditional family type roles. So in that way, we are already catering to those people. But 29%, that means 70% thinking about maybe they'd like a more progressive portrayal of women. Maybe it's not just about being a mum. And actually here you can see there's loads and loads of headroom for us to show women in more progressive roles, I don't know, as architects and as learning scientists, all of these kind of things.
But what's the upside?
Well, and I know that you're going to like this, once we get women into progressive roles, then actually those ads, if you do it well, 32% sales lift are much higher than if you do it in traditional roles. But Sam, you know how you've been around for quite a long time and you like to think about the longer term. So actually, if we look at the longer term, then we see a very similar result, and you're more likely to grow that brand and indeed profitability in the longer term if we get this right.
Okay, I get it. Women are 50% of the population, so that makes sense, 50% of our market. But let's get into a little bit further down the funnel now, okay? Let's talk about ethnicity. This is the part where I start to get really touchy about the culture wars, and I'm really nervous about what I put out into the world. And look, the Ipsos database for the ad testing world shows that actually we're doing pretty well in the UK. So 38% of ads show a person of color in it versus 18% in the population. So, and we're doing much better than our friends over the pond in the US. So actually, I think we're doing all right. Plus, the data shows that only 27% think there is too little discussion about racism in our country. So that means a very large percent of people think we're doing okay in terms of conversation around it. Do we really need to wade in and stick our oar in? Because I think it's kind of risky.
But Sam, I think that the picture might be a bit different if you were in the minority. there, actually, most people are thinking that there really isn't enough conversation about racism, and we need to do some more to make this happen and to really get that conversation going. And when we do, and when we actually put people into ads, so this is people featuring a person of colour, then, just as we saw for gender, we get these really good uplifts in terms of short and long-term sales. So I think it's really important.
But hang on, like, we're doing well on representation. So what is the problem here? Shouldn't most of our advertising be delivering this payoffs anyway?
Well, so I'm glad that you asked me that, because the real difference here is when you get inclusion right. It's not just about representation. It's about inclusion. It's about telling those stories that really reflect people's lives back to them. That's when the magic happens and we get these sales uplifts.
Okay, so if we're doing it, we have to do it right. That's where the money has got you. All right, now let's get to the really pointy end of the funnel, okay? Because, I mean, I take your point on women, I take your point on sort of showing sort of racial diversity. What about intersections? Look, this latest Deloitte study has done this, unpicked my mind as a CFO, and basically tells me that what I'm most worried about is the geopolitical context first, and then second, persistent labor shortages. And when you ask people what they want us to focus on in terms of sustainability, or, you know, if you think about the E, the S, and the G, all of the S stuff is way down the ladder. So I think we should spend more time on the E and like looking at environment, environmental issues versus going even further down the funnel on this.
Well, Sam, I mean, I hear what you're saying about that Deloitte report, and I read it too. And, you know, I'm having a lot of problems getting some really good people into my team as well. I see that part of my role is about presenting our brand and our company out there into the wider world, because then, if we're talking about diversity and inclusion, lo and behold, people will believe, if we do it well, obviously, people will believe that that is the kind of company we're at. And then they might come and want to work with us. Because from this report, we can see that 75% of people prefer to work at companies with diverse management.
Oh, well, isn't it lucky that all the paid exec board level, you know, has so many people that look like me?
Well, and I think you'll like this number even more. Actually, if you have a diverse management team, you're also much more likely to make more profit than other companies in your sector. So, you know, it is really good. But I was at this conference the other day, and this comedian guy, Nish Kumar, said we shouldn't fuck over all those other underrepresented groups. At the moment, we really are. They are not in our advertising, and you know, we really ought to be doing more on this front, Sam.
Why? Why, Eleanor? I need to know why.
Well, because when we break the conventions of advertising in our category, or indeed at all.
Sorry, what do you mean by conventions?
Well, so conventions, like, you know when you make toothpaste advertising, and you always have someone in a white coat going, here's the science bit. That's convention, right? But also the kinds of people that you always have in those ads, that might be a pure sort of conforming type of way of doing things. But actually, if we put underrepresented people into our ads in a way that is positive and true, then we will be breaking those conventions. Then we'll get more attention. And, more importantly, our media will be more effective. And that will save you some money in the longer term.
Ah, okay, good. Okay, so it's a case for media, I get it. I'm struggling to see what that actually looks like, though.
Okay, well, my friends at Ipsos, they've tested a couple of ads that did superbly well. So these Maltesers ads, which were done for the Paralympics, they take what you might think of as everyday sort of stories amongst, you know, groups of friends, but they're all at heart a portrayal of disability, and it's that disability that is the magic of the story and actually makes it out loud funny. So taking a story, normalising the situation, but then using the superpower of where we're at, that is what really gives us success. And of course, Virgin Atlantic, I mean, you probably saw it on the telly last night because it's been on a lot recently. But in and of itself, the joy, the sheer joy of the inclusivity in there, really makes it stand out from everything else in that category. And of course, for me, my favourite bit is the older woman at the end in a professional capacity, flying all those people to amazing destinations around the world. Now, the other thing is that we also need to make advertising accessible. And we shouldn't see that as a chore. We shouldn't see it as something just to get it through Clearcast. Actually, if we do it well, again, we can get higher levels of sales uplift. So here's a John Lewis Christmas ad. We test it, or Ipsos tested it, in a format with the audio description as well. And it did even better. So accessibility is good for our business. Okay, at this point, we're going to step out of our role play and back into the real world. And this debate is all based on conversations that we have had with our clients. So we're really hoping that this really resonates with you and reflects some of the conversations that we know that you're having in order to get support in your business for this. And hopefully this then gives you the evidence that you need to generate that enthusiasm throughout the people that are providing the money.
Yes, and we will also kind of take a pause to reflect, because all of your fears about backlash are very founded on some real kind of threats to the bottom line. Let's take a step and look at where you are, because there is a spectrum of action, and you need to know what's right for you. And I can assure you that before we sort of put on our suits of armor and get into Joan of Arc mode and drag out the soapbox, I can assure you there's plenty of things in your house to fix first. Be it, are your ads actually accessible? To, are you actually doing are you doing inclusion, or are you just doing kind of representation at the casting stage where your poor production manager is running around with a shopping list of people that they need to find? So, do no harm first. And any brand can do that. And you can do it with joy. The examples that Eleanor talked about earlier were just brilliant, joyful examples. And that's simple and true and easy. And any brand can do that. And then, when you've done the hard yards, if you're a brand that happens to be born purposeful, which is brilliant, as well, then you can kind of look at the stewardship for society and, really kind of bang the drum for equality in society in a different kind of way. And I actually want to take the moment to celebrate a brand that has spent 20 years on the subject of inclusion, and they have kept the same campaign platform going for 20 years, and they've recently released an ad kind of celebrating their 20 years, and then with a view to the future as well. So I'm going to play it for you now. So, I can tell you, as a child who colored herself with yellow hair and blue eyes, I really appreciate the fact that we might be shaping culture to look a bit differently in terms of the visual imagery we put out into the world. So, I'm going to leave you with 3 things to think on. First is know yourself. Who are you as a brand? What is it relevant and sensible for you to do? What are the steps you can immediately take? And get your house in order as well. Actually have a look at what you're putting out into the world and look at where the opportunities are and see where you could do better, because I can assure you that there is plenty going on already that you're putting out there that has room to improve. And then think about it more as a strategic challenge rather than a casting one. And then when you get down to execution, hey, joy. Joy is a brilliant thing that any brand can do. You know, inclusion is all about joy. So you don't have to go straight to activism if you're worried about wading into the culture wars, or if you're worried about, you know, your fit. You have a choice, right? Joy is a very simple way to kind of embrace inclusion. And I think I love the examples you showed, Ali. The Walkers one is a brilliant example of that as well. And finally, I hope that we've armed you with the evidence, some of our enthusiasm for the topic, and basically our last parting shot to you is go woke.
Because you won't go broke.
Thank you for having us.